Guys, welcome to another great edition of ACC Audible. This is your buddy Ian, joined by my good friend Ken. Ken, how's it going down there in Florida this week?
You know, man, it's not actually scorching hot anymore. We got down into like the 50s for a little bit. It's crazy. I love it. I know.
50 sounds nice. That's like a warm day here. Nowadays, it kind of is. But, yeah, man, always good to talk to you. And just before we jump in with the Blitz here real quick and some mailbag and just a couple of good discussions about the schedule this week, we're going to jump real quick into the new college football playoff rankings. So the ACC still looks pretty good in the poll, but honestly better than last week. A team dropped out, however, multiple teams moved up. So first of all, we'll see Clemson. They're still sitting at number 2, 9-0 overall. The honorary ACC team, Notre Dame, is number 3. They moved up a spot after LSU's loss. So Notre Dame does play an ACC team this week, so who knows, maybe a top 5 upset, man. You never know. We've got a couple other teams down there. Syracuse at number 13. They're the third team with 2 losses, so good for them being ranked up there. However, the ACC is still not getting a lot of respect because we see, a 2-loss Kentucky, a 2-loss LSU, multiple spots ahead of them, which is interesting. Considering Syracuse, one of their losses did come to number 2 Clemson in a real close nail-biter. Of course, Kentucky's loss is not as good. LSU's losses look pretty dang good against Alabama and Florida. NC State jumping in at number 14. I'm honestly not impressed with NC State still, but somehow they're 6-2. They moved up 7 spots this week, where Syracuse moved up 6, so good for those teams. And then BC, after beating Virginia Tech this weekend, is 7-2, same record as Syracuse, looks great. They moved up 5 spots to number 17. So the ACC holds number 2, number 13, number 14, number 17. So good job for the conference. UVA did drop out. They were number 25. They lost to Pittsburgh this week. So good for the ACC here in the college football playoff rankings. Mr. Ken, he got a little blitz for me.
Yeah, man, just going to go over some of the action from this past weekend. As you just mentioned, Virginia, just really disappointing. Both of us, you thought Pitt was going to win, but you picked Virginia, and I thought Virginia was going to win, and I was just wrong. But not a great game to watch. Wet field, really of a defensive game. The Pitt rushing game, the defense were key in this game. Senior Darren Hall rushed for 3 touchdowns, over 200 yards. Quadre Olison was limited with a hamstring injury. And Pickett he only was 7-14. They didn't need him. They were able to run the ball and really held that offense led by Bryce Perkins. They only scored 13 points and only had about 250 yards of total offense. So Pitt wins that game 23-13. That, I believe, was on a Friday night.
Yeah, so I got to watch that game on Friday night, actually, and basically exactly what you said is how they won. They got UVA behind the chains, they forced Perkins to throw, and they had such a great pass rush. He just didn't even have a chance to escape. But some other interesting things about the game that I saw, just Pittsburgh's been very impressive these last few weeks. They're leading the Coastal, which is something to take note of. Their record overall does not look good because they've played, I think, 5 top 25 teams, Pat Narduzzi said today, which is super impressive. But the real key is this. They win when Pickett doesn't have to throw the ball. They have 3 running backs at Pittsburgh that are awesome. And they do a power rushing attack, similar to what Boston College is doing right now. And Pittsburgh's really coming on here in the second half, so good for them. But also, their kicker, I believe I saw this from Clarkston, Michigan. And while they botched an extra point this week, which Pittsburgh has done multiple times this year, he nailed a really, really long field goal to put that game out of reach. So, yeah, congratulations to their special teams unit getting it together. Pittsburgh looks like the real deal in the Coastal.
Yeah, more so than any other conference. I think, especially this week, you'll see multiple teams with quarterbacks in the ACC that threw for, under 100 yards and had less than 25 attempts, but their team still won. And so we'll talk about that here. Actually, next, Clemson destroys Louisville 77-16. This was never even a game. Louisville even only had 16 from a returned kickoff that they got early in the game. But, we thought this game would be boring. It was totally boring. I didn't even really watch much of it. Trevor Lawrence actually was only 8 of 12 for 59 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. When I actually went to look the stats up, the second-string quarterback was actually listed as the leading, stat line guy. And I was like, oh, I wonder if Lawrence got hurt again. No, they just didn't need him at all. And so they had all their, backups in, midway through the third quarter. But they did have 3 100-yard rushers. That was clearly the game plan going in. Dabo Swinney knows that he doesn't need to risk injury to his star quarterback right now. He can just run it down the throat of that Brian Van Gorder defense. Amazing defense by old Van Gorder, our buddy.
Clemson more than doubled Louisville's yardage in this game. Just amazing.
Oh, yeah.
661 yards.
It made me feel better about the Florida State loss to Clemson because, I mean, this was even more of a beatdown than they gave us last week. So, moving on, Syracuse offense is still rolling. They beat Wake Forest 41-24. That offense is looking great right now. Dino Babers, guys, they're just playing great right now. They showed some clips of them in the locker room afterwards. Just so fun to see that team playing well. Eric Dungy, really back to his old ways, was the leading passer, obviously, but also the leading rusher for the team. He was 23 of 35 for 157 yards. 24 carries on the night, 119 yards on the ground, and a touchdown. That offense just is really doing great things. You might even say they are the most diverse attack in the conference. Obviously, Clemson has the most explosive offense, but really, Syracuse can beat you in many different ways, and it's really nice just to see them clicking on all cylinders right now.
So if you look at the stat sheet, yardage was equal, first downs equal, it looked like an equal game. Wake Forest with 3 turnovers.
Yep, it's killer. It'll get you. So moving on to the next game, Georgia Tech, UNC. This was a game that you and I both kind of thought Georgia Tech would win this game, and we were right. I said last week that Tobias Oliver, the command that he has of this offense, the leadership that he shows, his presence in that offense was going to be key. It turned out to be correct. They were efficient on offense. Defensively, they've got some things to work on, but in their defense, UNC has looked better on offense the last few weeks. So this was a good, complete win, good, complete game for Georgia Tech and Paul Johnson. They are, like we talked about last week, starting to play better towards the end of the season, much like they did last year. Both teams in this game had 3 turnovers, but Georgia Tech, obviously, that running game, over 450 yards rushing. I mean, that is just ridiculous, even if you run a triple option offense. So, and then they even complemented that. Tobias Oliver was 2 of 2 passing, 104 yards. Both were pretty long passes and average of 52 yards a pass. That's not too bad, is it?
No, not bad at all. And I saw the replay of that touchdown. It was early in the second quarter. They were already up 14-7. The defense bit so hard on that B-back, wide open receiver, 86-yard touchdown pass, put him up 21-7.
Yeah, a little fun fact, Ian, that I saw this week that I knew you'd find interesting. In Georgia Tech's last 3 road games, so their last 3 conference road games, they played Louisville, Virginia Tech, UNC. Their offense has scored a combined 153 points and gained a total of 1,584 yards. All 3 were wins. And I just, that's pretty impressive on the road in hostile environments. That running game, it travels, man. I mean, you and I have talked about this before. That triple option attack, it travels well. We know how just running games in general, if you're going to a hostile environment, maybe the weather's not great, the passing game can go back and forth depending on the conditions of the weather, that kind of thing. But that triple option offense, man, that thing is dangerous. It's consistent, and I love watching it, man, honestly.
4-1 in their last 5 games.
Yep.
You've got to wonder what would happen if they didn't blow those games against USF and Pittsburgh, because we both think that they were the better team there. Their only losses would be Clemson and Duke right now.
Yeah, they've only had like one game. I forget who it was. There was only one game this season where I thought, wow, they really did lose that game. But the other games that they've lost on their schedule this season, you kind of thought, wow, they should have been in those games and probably should have won. They're sitting at 5-4,
right.
3-3 in the conference. They're in good shape right now. Obviously, the Coastal is one of those divisions in football where there's a lot of parity in that division. Right now, the Atlantic has the upper hand with 4 teams in the college football playoff. But I would argue that the Coastal is top to bottom just more even overall, So it's going to be interesting to see what Paul Johnson and those Yellow Jackets do going forward. So moving forward, we got your Hokies, man. BC 31, VT 21. You and I both talked about Virginia Tech's struggles at home at Lane Stadium recently, and unfortunately, it continues. BC. It looked like they were just controlling the game, running the ball. They have a great ground and pound offense. From what you were telling me about the game, I did see a couple highlights, but from what you were telling me, basically, VT was up 14-7 at the half, but then they had some quarterback issues. Ryan Willis leaves the game in the third quarter with an injury. Hendon Hooker comes in and mishandles the first snap and turns it over. We did also see the highly touted freshman Quincy Patterson come in and play some. Looked pretty good in the limited action. Willis did also try and come back in, but was unsuccessful and actually ended up throwing an interception that led to a BC score. But when you look at the game, Virginia Tech was in this game stat-wise. They outgained BC, longer time of possession, but they had more turnovers, and BC was just able to control the game and play situations a little better. I know you went to the game. How was it?
Typical for what we've seen from Virginia Tech this year. The third quarter is a disaster. They gave up 14 points. They didn't score a single one. As you said before halftime, they had the ball basically at field goal range, and the backup quarterback, who's really the third stringer, mishandles the snap and kind of gives it away. And then the third quarter, we see the starter come back in, try to force the ball, interception, and then he gets hurt again. So really down to your fourth-string quarterback, making mistakes. But you've really got to question some of the coaching decisions. The team keeps pushing that off. But in the third quarter this year, Virginia Tech has been the worst team I have seen in the ACC.
Yeah, those third quarter struggles really have seemed to hurt them this year, and you and I are going to talk a little bit about both of our respective teams because they're just horrible this year. But moving on to my team, who's also equally probably worse. They are worse because you guys beat us at the first game of the season. But FSU falls to NC State 47-28. Good game for the Wolfpack, honestly. They game planned so well against the Seminoles defense, which really had been the Seminoles' strength all season. And wow, this game got ugly quick. James Blackman did get the start for an injured DeAndre Francois. He played really well, was actually the ACC quarterback of the week, 29-46, 421 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I will say, I know a lot of Nole fans are saying that he should start the rest of the season and all that kind of stuff. This was against a very suspect North Carolina State secondary that a lot of teams have taken advantage of, and they're ranked very low as far as statistics go. But give credit to Ryan Fidley. Wasn't sacked all game, only had 1 quarterback hurry. That offensive line really knows how to protect him. They game plan in a way that gets the ball out of his hands quickly. He was 21 of 27, 240 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he was just on the same page with all of his receivers. They had a great game on offense, and were able to put 47 points up on an FSU defense that, except for the Clemson game, had been playing decently this season. Did you get a chance to watch this one, man?
I actually didn't get a chance to watch this one because I knew you'd tell me all about it, so there's no need.
Well, here's a little stat for you. In the last 2 games, the FSU defense has now given up 106 points. And that's the first time ever since the Bowden era, since before the Bowden era, actually. So, we knew they would give up a lot of points against Clemson. Clemson's a great offensive team, but I honestly didn't think that they would give up 47 to NC State. Credit the Wolfpack for a great game plan. They were able to get one-on-one matchups on the outside as well as on the interior with their blocking schemes. They ran right at our undersized linebackers and undersized defensive ends, so they had a great game plan going in. And then the final game, Duke pulls out a win 20-12 over Miami. I know a lot of Miami fans are pretty upset down in Coral Gables right now. This is the first time that Duke has beaten Miami at home in 42 years. Let that sink in for a second. Miami is in shambles right now, much like Florida State, much like Virginia Tech. They're rotating quarterbacks. I believe that Malik Rozier did start this game. N'Kosi Perry came in and they started kind of rotating back and forth. But honestly, both quarterbacks did not play well. But Miami actually rushed for over 300 yards in the game and still lost. I don't know how that can happen. I'm sure that's happened to Georgia Tech in the past, but I don't see how a normal, pro-style attack can rush for over 300 yards and still lose the game. They only scored 12 points, obviously. The defense, this is the same defense, the Duke defense, that gave up 54 points to Pitt the week earlier, and they only give up 12 to Miami. That really shows that Miami's offense is really struggling. The natives down there, I know you and I talked about it off air, a lot of complaints about Richt, a lot of complaints about his play calling, and just, the situation there with, should he be the one calling plays? A lot of people don't think so. So it's going to be interesting to see moving forward as the season progresses because they don't look good. This is a team that at the beginning of the season, this was supposed to be one of the main torchbearers for especially the Coastal, but really the conference as well. These were guys that were expected to meet Clemson in the ACC championship game, and they do not look like a great team right now.
So something I really want to look into is When is the last time that the media preseason poll has picked the Coastal winner correctly? Because I honestly can't remember the last time they've done that.
That's a great point because, for so long in the Atlantic, it was either Clemson or Florida State. So there was a really good chance of being correct there. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'd have to go back and check that because honestly, you're right.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up for sure.
Okay, yeah, I can't think of a time when it was exactly because I know there was that year that Georgia Tech won. There was a year that Duke won. Obviously, you guys have won it. Maybe in 2010 were you guys picked as the favorite in 2010?
I assume so. It was either us or Georgia Tech that year.
Okay, maybe that year, but you're right. I mean, the Coastal traditionally, and this is no different this year, is always the conference that it's hard to pick. I mean, there's so much parity, so many competitive games in that division. It's always fun to watch, but can be frustrating at times. So
if anything, I'd say it's a curse because Georgia Tech was picked to win the division in 2015. Had an okay season, not great. 2016, North Carolina was picked to win it, and we saw how they did last. I mean, it's just awful. I mean, it seems like the person that's picked to win the Coastal has fallen flat on their face every single year for the past 5+.
Yeah, it is a curse, and this year it seems to be no different. So we'll have to see what Miami does here in the future, but they've got to get some stuff together. I think Richt does need to make some wholesale changes, whether it's offensive line coach or whether it's handing over play calling duties. But right now, I would say that team is in shambles. So that's the Blitz for this week, and it was a great weekend of college football in the ACC, man.
Yeah, quick update here. Ken did a great job this week. He went 5-2 because I picked my Hokies like an idiot. I went 4-3. Also, as you said, I totally called that Pitt game. I was like, I know they're going to win this game. They're better. But every time I pick against UVA, they kept winning. So I even said to you jokingly, I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick them and they'll lose. Watch. And
you were right.
Enough, so I went 4-3. So, Ken, you're only 3 games back now, man. And we're picking bowl games and 3 weeks of the season left to go. Could close on up. I mean, who knows? I might pick Liberty over to UVA this week.
Oh, I would love that. Please do. Watch them win.
Doubtful.
Watch them win.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Oh, my goodness.
So, Ken, I hear you have a few topics for us.
I do, man. But to be quite honest, the topics I want to talk about are how our teams are freaking horrible, and they suck this year. I mean, what's the talk around Virginia Tech Town, I mean, what's going on?
You're right. Both our teams are horrible, but at least mine doesn't have a losing record. That's all I'm saying.
Man, it's brutal.
That's all I'm saying.
It's brutal.
Yeah, no, so we're not looking too good. 1-3 at home for Virginia Tech. Honestly, the offense has been the most disappointing thing. I know the defense is really young. They're giving up a lot of points, but we expected it to be a rough year on defense. We thought the offense would be able to carry us. We had a decent amount of returning starters, all new receivers for sure, but the offense has just not been productive, and it's just looked ugly. I just did some stats, looked at some stats here because we were talking earlier a little bit. And in the third quarter against Power 5 teams this year, Virginia Tech's been outscored 49-14. So, I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. Now, the Florida State game was 0-0 in the third quarter, so that was probably one of our best third quarters.
You're welcome.
But yeah, it's just been ridiculous. If you look at against our Notre Dame, we gave it 14, didn't score anything. Against Georgia Tech, gave it 14, didn't score anything. Against Boston College, gave it 14, didn't score anything. And the coaching staff says it's all about execution. Well, you know what? The mistakes are bad. But maybe you're expecting too much from young players. I don't know exactly what it is, but the third quarter especially has looked really, really bad for this team. A lot of mistakes, sure, but in reality, a lot of what you see is the defense finally gets off the field, and the offense goes 3 and out.
Yeah.
And then the defense comes back on the field, and they stop them again, 3 and out. I think the first 3 drives after halftime for Virginia Tech were all 3 and outs and an interception. Sorry, the first 4 drives, 3 and outs and 1 interception. That's pretty unacceptable, and you can't give your defense that type of field to defend, especially in the interception where they gave it up the 19-yard line. So it's just an inconsistent group. We've taken leads 14-7 against both Georgia Tech and Boston College with a chance to go up more. Against Georgia Tech, muffed a punt. Against Boston College, threw that or had that missed snap. You can't do things like that. You need to catch punts. You need to catch snaps. It's pretty basic, obvious stuff. I blame a little bit on the players, but I think the offensive staff and the head coach deserve a lot more blame. The energy also doesn't seem there. It seems like there's almost, the defense has a lot of energy. It seems like the offense is almost monotonous. Like I don't know if they don't believe the message, but it's It's not as good as the defensive side. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Do you think? What are people talking about at Blacksburg? Do you think that people are losing confidence in Fuente, or is it more he needs to make some changes to the coaching staff? I mean, what are people kind of wanting up there?
As a fan base that's used to having coaches around for a long time and going through struggles at points in time, the thing that really ticks off our fans the most is that Fuente doesn't come out and say, hey, we did make a couple bad play calls or we made a mistake here or there. Fuente basically is coming out and saying, no, we had a perfect game plan. We prepared perfectly. I don't know why these guys messed it up. That's what we're hearing. And a lot of fans are saying, really? I mean, I know these are 18 to 22-year-old guys, but really? You're going to say you didn't make any mistakes? And he defended his offensive coordinator last week. He's like, this guy set 10 school records his first year here. Yeah, well, he had all of the guys left over from Scott Loeffler and Frank Beamer. He had, Bucky Hodges on the outside. That guy's a freak of nature. Isaiah Ford, Cam Phillips. These are guys who all of them were drafted. Well, I guess Phillips wasn't, but he signed on draft day. And then he had pretty good blockers up front, and then he had Gerard Evans. The guy's incredible. And the year before, McMillan was a 1,000-yard rusher back there. The offense was stacked with guys that year. No wonder you set a bunch of school records. I think in fact, the records they beat were from the year before, which just shows that team got older and older and better. And then they all graduated, and what have we seen? Not good. It just makes our fans mad when a coach can't take some onus on themselves. And Bud Foster has also just blamed youth. But in his defense, the defense is way younger. 72% of our two deep week one were freshmen or sophomores, and we've had so many guys hurt. We had another, I told you, after the Georgia Tech game, we had 2 guys hurt. We had 2 more guys hurt last week. So multiple more freshmen are having to step up. Guys are having to slide around positions. Safeties are coming down playing in the box at linebacker instead. So I can give the defense some credit.
Sure.
And Foster's even taken someone on himself. But the offense to hear, nope, we're doing everything perfectly. I don't know why these guys aren't executing. It's just frustrating. If you're a real leader, you take responsibility.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of what you said is just echoed in my sentiments here at Florida State with the struggles that we've had. There's a lot of just, the kids aren't executing. The kids aren't doing this. The kids aren't doing that. The players need to work harder in practice, blah, blah, blah. And, at some point, I get it. Players have to do what the coaches tell them. But then at some point, maybe there's a different way you tell the kids the message. And this year has just been frustrating for a lot of reasons for Florida State. I think that it was kind of even just set up in the preseason. We talked about this, how Willie was so good with the boosters, with the fans, with, he's a Florida State guy. He grew up a fan. He knows all the traditions. He knows, everything about the program. He really wanted to bring former players back and had Bobby Bowden speak and all that stuff that Jimbo wasn't great at. And it was so good that I think he just really boosted expectation. And then we saw the product in the field, and it was just nowhere near what had been, preached to us and set up for us as fans in the preseason. And I get it. The offensive line, it's the thing that everyone goes back to and talks about. We recently had our 9th starting combination on the offensive line in 9 games. We've been decimated there by injuries at a position where we were already weak and really already not that talented. And we have guys there that weren't even recruited to run a spread system. Now, I think that's been overblown a little bit. You should be able to teach your guys in a spring how to do that, get them in shape for that. I think that's been blown out of proportion just a tad. But, yes, the offensive line's been bad, but I think it's just a compound effect of this team is right now very mentally weak. We saw last year that they didn't deal with adversity very well. A couple key players here and there were really just holding the team back. They weren't good teammates. When things got tough, they just kind of folded. And I think you're seeing a little bit of that this year as well. And I think the tough part for Willie, and he's definitely not perfect in all of this, is there's been a big call for a culture change at Florida State. And I think it's a change that involves a little less entitlement and a little more hard work. And I think that was hard for him to swallow when he first got to Florida State. I think even partly he thought, hey, I'm going to Florida State. I'm going to have these great athletes to run my awesome system, and it's going to be perfect. And maybe he didn't think it would be perfect, but it would be really productive, and it hasn't been. And I'm sure that has been tough for him to to deal with. I mean, that's not easy. And then compound that with, the quarterback issues. DeAndre Francois has just turned out really to be not a great teammate. Obviously, he's been getting killed back there, so I understand. But, you can't have guys, when you're the quarterback, you're the leader of the team, you can't show your frustrations openly to your teammates, to the media, to the fans. You just can't let that happen. And now we've got a little quarterback controversy going on. People think that because James Blackman played so well against a suspect NC State defense that he should be the starter going forward. I would argue that had Blackman started, the games this season, if he had been the starter since day one, the results wouldn't be too different behind that offensive line. So I will say, and then we talked about this a little bit off air, and this kind of takes us into our next point. Willie Taggart did allow Walt Bell, the offensive coordinator, to call plays in the NC State game. And while the game was not perfect by any means from a play calling standpoint, it did seem to be a little better, a little more diverse, although we need to fix first down play calls. It seems like we're always running the ball on first down. But it is promising to see that a guy that is an offensive mind, like Jimbo, who never relinquished the offensive play calling, it is nice to see that Willie Taggart is capable of doing that. And that kind of takes us to our next point down in Miami, where a lot of people are saying that Mark Richt should do the same thing. And you have a great story about Justin Fuente and why he chose to give up play calling at Virginia Tech. Can you tell that story? I love this story.
They asked Fuente when he first came to Virginia Tech, and he had two offensive coordinators under him, co-offensive coordinators at Memphis. Also, that was the thing I saw on the message board today, too. Someone said, what if we took the other offensive coordinator, who is the offensive coordinator down at Texas A&M right now, by the way. But they said, they asked Fuente, are you going to call plays here? And Fuente said, no. And they said, why not? You've done so well calling plays. You took TCU to an undefeated season, a Rose Bowl win calling plays. Why aren't you going to do that? And he said, because if you're the head coach, there's more important things to be worrying about. On Thursday night, when you're driving home from practice, you don't want to be thinking about 3rd and 3. What play am I going to run on 3rd and 3? You want to be thinking about, how am I going to prepare my guys for this game? How am I going to get them amped up? If we're losing at half, what are we going to do? That type of thing. He said, if you're thinking about 3rd and 3, you're missing so much more. And so the way that you really view that is, that's the CEO approach. Whereas a coach, you trust your coaching staff and you live and die by them. And that can kill you. We saw it kill Frank Beamer at times when he had guys around for 20, 30 years, and they didn't do as well, but he trusted them. And we see that with Fuente right now, too. He's got a lot of his friends in these positions. They've done well before. He trusts them because a lot of people view a head coach like that. If you're calling plays, you're missing something else.
So let me ask you this. We're talking about Mark Richt here. Do you see him relinquishing those play calling duties, either at the end of this season or maybe towards the beginning of next season? I mean, it really seems, now I get, coaches aren't going to fold under fan pressure, but I mean, we're not even talking about fan pressure. We're talking about just offensive results and production. I mean, he's got to see that partly it is play calling related. I mean, the guys have to execute, but at the same time, you can also put your kids in better position to be productive.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You can always, as a coach, do a better job of putting the right players in the right positions, or even identifying players in your team that might play different positions to stand out. Sometimes we'll see teams shuffle around guys, and we'll find a diamond in the rough type of thing. The question about him giving up play calling, that has to be difficult because he's basically always done it. I know he gave it up for a few years there at Georgia, I believe, but he's always really called plays, and he's been fairly good at it. Look at his track record. He's very successful. But a lot of people think that type of offense, the pro style, is a little archaic, and they want him to give it up. But here's always my question. Who are you going to give it up to? A guy like him has never had a great offensive mind on his staff, to call plays offensive mind, because he hasn't needed to. So if he just hands it off to the current quarterback's coach or something, current receivers coach, how do you know that will actually be better? It's hard to give up. It's hard to give up play calling. I don't know what he should really do. Fans are always going to complain, but he does have a young offense.
I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better, but like exactly what you're talking about with Fuente and his quote, it's not necessarily about the offense necessarily getting that much better with someone else calling plays. It's about what Mark Richt may be missing while he's calling the plays.
So here's the question. What else is wrong with Miami right now? And what do they need to fix?
Well, I think they've got a lot of things on the offensive side of the ball besides the play calling is a larger part of the big issue, which is their offense in general is just not good. So you've got to take a couple steps back and say, okay, maybe I let someone else call the plays, someone that knows our system, the way I like to call plays. Maybe it's even similar to the way Mark Richt plays. Maybe it doesn't even get that much better. But then, maybe Mark can focus on, working the referees more, working with his quarterback when he comes off the field, maybe being more of a quarterback coach even than an offensive play caller, and maybe noticing more things on the field or in between plays that might just help his team succeed more. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm not saying it'll fix all their problems and they're going to all of a sudden win all their games if he just gives up the play calling. But I do think that there are times when there are things that you're missing if you're always in your playbook, play after play, and trying to figure out what the next move is. You know what I mean?
Totally agree. And obviously as the coach, if you can step back and you can look at the big picture, it's probably going to help your football team.
Yeah, I mean, even when we played them down in Coral Gables, there were times where I thought, wow, this seems like an opportunity to take a shot here, or this seems like, more of a place where you might want to start, a little more play action here, or that kind of thing. And it was interesting. They just seemed to really, at least in my opinion, take their foot off the gas when they should have been going harder at the time. So, I've never, Mark Richt was a great offensive coordinator back when he was at Florida State, from, I believe it was late 90s into the, mid 2000s. But, since then, it's I almost feel like his system and his play calling style hasn't progressed enough into this new age of college football. And that was something that, even with Jimbo, we thought sometimes maybe was the case. Not that it can't be effective necessarily, but you and I talk all the time about how much respect, even though we don't like Nick Saban, how much respect we have for him and his ability to change and his ability to adapt and how different his offense is. I mean, bringing in a Lane Kiffin, that was such a hire that was, people were like, what is he doing? Why would he do this? But he was trying to upgrade his offense. He was trying to modify and adapt and grow his offensive approach. And now you look at it and you say, we talked about this a couple podcasts ago. You wouldn't even recognize this as an Alabama offense if they weren't wearing Alabama uniforms right now. So I do think it's interesting how some coaches have the ability to kind of move forward and move with the times, and some coaches are a little stuck in their ways. Not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but you do have to implement, I think, certain concepts and certain even plays, specific plays from different systems. I do believe that that's a key to having a successful offense in this day and age in college football.
Yeah, I completely agree. And times have changed. It doesn't mean you can't adapt with the times, but exactly like you said about Saban, you need to be innovative, and sometimes it's taking a risk. Saban knows my defense is going to be good because I can always oversee what happens there. He's not going to call the plays, but he can oversee. Right. But on the offensive side, he's just given so much freedom to guys because he hires them and trusts them. And look how many different guys he's really had there over the years. It's been multiple different coordinators, and he has Loxley there now, I believe. So it's all about trusting a different new guy. And Loxley's a guy who has changed his style a little bit to even fit that personnel. So a lot of being good in life is adapting. If you're a sales guy 30 years ago, you've had to learn how to use BlackBerries, projectors, computers, all these things, right? You can't keep the same way. You always have to adapt to keep up with the times. So maybe that's Mark Richt's thing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, hey, we actually have a couple mailbag questions. Got some good ones here to kind of close out the podcast. And this one is from Jerry in Atlanta, Georgia. And he says, right now the Atlantic has 4 teams in the college football playoff rankings. Is the Atlantic one of the best divisions in all of college football? Thanks so much. Appreciate the show. Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate the question. That's a great question because, at first glance you say, and you and I have talked about, the beginning of the season, we were like, all right, the Atlantic Division, clearly the stronger conference. We thought Florida State was going to be better than they are. We knew Clemson was a known commodity, knew they were going to be great. Obviously BC, we were on the BC bandwagon really early in the season. Then things started kind of to falter a little bit. But really, you've seen the resurgence here of the Atlantic Division. You've got NC State playing really, really well. Boston College has kind of gotten back on track, also playing very well. And then Syracuse looks fantastic, a couple plays away from being undefeated. And then Clemson, of course, at the top of that division, looking great. What do you think about the question, man?
Yeah, it's definitely a great question. Throughout the season, we've really wondered which division would take over. And we knew Clemson would be the number one. That's pretty obvious. But I am a little bit surprised that Syracuse has played as well this year. I thought they'd be an 8-9 win team. They definitely gotten better. And I thought that that NC State would fall off more. At 6-2, they're looking pretty good as well. So definitely surprised that the Atlantic is playing as well as they are. But here's the bottom line about the Atlantic, the dead honest truth. Wake Forest and Louisville make the rest of them look better. It's been a long time since we've seen, I know UNC was pretty awful last year, but it's been a long time since we've seen two god-awful teams in the same division. Whereas if you look at the Atlantic, only one team is a losing record, and that's North Carolina. When you look over at the Atlantic, 3 teams have losing records. And so it makes it a little bit easier when you have guys to pick on, shall we say, to win. Because look at Florida State. They have 2 ACC wins, but who did they come over, Ken? You've got Louisville there, and then Wake Forest, correct? Is that the other one?
Right, yep.
So those 2 teams even below them are the only 2 ACC wins. But if you look at everyone else, Clemson, Boston College, Syracuse, NC State, they feasted off of those teams. On the flip side, they've played very well against the Coastal, the Atlantic has this year. But as you said, kind of alluded to, the Coastal Division is really even. So we have a lot of teams sitting right there about to pounce. We're still here with 3 weeks to go. I don't know if Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, or Georgia Tech are going to win this division.
Right.
Because Georgia Tech has a tiebreaker over Virginia Tech, but Pittsburgh has a tiebreaker over Georgia Tech. But then, so it's all going to be very interesting. And the cool thing is, some of it's going to come down to the last weekend. Obviously not for GT, they play Georgia, but a lot of this is going to come down to that last weekend. And then we'll see if Pittsburgh, we'll have to see if Pittsburgh can pull it out. They're at 4-1 now. People are starting to look at them and say, wow, they're playing some good ball.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Jerry, I would say that the Atlantic Division is probably a top 3, top 4 division in college football. I would say that, right now you've got to look at the SEC West. You also have to look at the Big Ten. I believe it's the Big Ten East, the division with obviously Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. I think those 2 are probably your top 2, and then maybe the Atlantic Division slides in at a 3. I'm not not to take anything away. We talked a lot about conference perception. I do think that Syracuse is legit. I think that they're a really great team this year. We really like the way they're playing. I think BC is good, but not great. And I do think that NC State is still a little bit, they're playing well, but I don't think that they're as good maybe as that ranking indicates right now. They've got a good resume together. We always go back to that West Virginia game, which, the way West Virginia is playing right now, they would have won that game hands down. So, the Wolfpack have definitely gotten, I don't want to say lucky, but they've definitely benefited from certain things that have happened this year as far as scheduling goes, and the opponents that they've played well, but there's no opponent that you really say, wow, that was an impressive win. And so I do think that you can't say that the Atlantic Division is, the top division in all of college football, but I definitely think they're top 3, top 4. So
the question really comes down to here. Usually we'd say, the SEC West, the Big Ten East, they're the 2 best than everyone else. That's what people said the last few years. But really in the SEC now, you've got to question that even with the East, with Georgia sitting at number 5, Kentucky at 11, Florida at 15. I know a little unfair because Florida has 3 losses there, but they look pretty good. They have the exact same conference records as the top 3 in the West, except Alabama's no losses. Georgia has that 1. And then I've got to ask you, man, the Big 12, do you really think that because if we rank both those SEC conferences or divisions and the one Big Ten division ahead of the Atlantic, do you think the Atlantic is better than the entire Big 12 since they don't have divisions? I think they are, because I just think they are.
I think it's tough to say. I think that, obviously no one wants to play West Virginia right now. That offense is scary, dangerous. You and I already talked about Will Grier. Probably if we're a GM of a pro football team, we're taking him first in the draft. But I do think, it's one of those things. It's a different kind of conference. Offensively, I think that those offense, Texas's offense, Oklahoma's offense, obviously, and West Virginia's offense, those might be your top 3 offenses in the country even. besides Alabama, maybe obviously they're looking great, but those might be 3 of your top 5 offenses in the country, period. But they also might be 3 of your middle of the pack, lower level defenses. So, offensively they bow to no one. But I think as complete teams go, I would put a Syracuse in the mix to beat a West Virginia. I'm not saying I would pick them to win, but I think that it would be a close game. I think that if you look at Clemson plays with any of those teams simply because their defense sets them apart from those 3 teams. So I do think that we would be competitive when it comes to the Big 12. I think that, I'm not a big Big 12 fan simply because the defense in that league is porous. The offenses are fun to watch, but sometimes you get tired of seeing 77-75. What is that? So, for right now, man, I would probably put the Atlantic Division over those teams in the Big 12.
Awesome. I would totally agree. One benefit for West Virginia is they actually have one of the better defenses in the Big 12. I know they get 41 points to Texas in that 1-point win this week, but still, overall, one of the better defenses in that conference.
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Jerry. That was a great tangent he got us on a little bit. Speaking of Alabama, man, we got to talk about this. Did you see the game against LSU?
I caught a little bit of the game, and by that I mean I saw it when it was like 22-0. Like that's when I turned and saw it and was like, okay, don't need to watch.
Yeah, it was pretty much what we thought. That Wake Forest defense did give the Alabama offense their first real test of the season, and early on it was close, 9-0. But what the difference to me in this game, if another team is playing that LSU defense, the difference for me was Tua and his accuracy is just unmatched. There's good coverage on those Alabama wide receivers, and by the way, those receivers are excellent. But, there's no defense for a perfectly thrown ball. And that's what they have at quarterback right now for Alabama. So, again, if he's healthy, he did take a couple shots, one in particular below the belt that I was just like, I felt bad for him. But, as long as he's healthy and he's got that gimp knee right now, but as long as he's able to throw the ball, I don't see anyone beating them. But I know, guys, we get a lot of complaints that we talk about Alabama too much. But, hey, man, they're just dominating.
You got to talk about Alabama.
Yeah.
Because you assume Clemson's probably going to play them later this year.
Oh.
But, yeah, just this game, 29-0, looks like a blowout. But looking at the stat sheet, 576 yards for Bama, 196 for LSU.
Yeah.
They had 29 first downs to 13 first downs. Like, my goodness, what a complete spread there.
Well, and you and I said we don't think that LSU has the offense to stick around and score points with that Alabama offense, and we were right.
The bottom line is they got rid of Matt Canada because they didn't like his style, but they went back to old LSU style where they don't really score a lot of points. And if you looked at all their games this year, even the other one they lost, but if you really look at LSU, they have not been impressive on the offensive side of the football. They've just tried to limit mistakes. But against a team with a defense as good as yours, you can't just limit mistakes. On the other hand here, jumping into this West Virginia game real quick, I don't know if you saw the end, Ken, but West Virginia actually went for a 2-point conversion at the end of the game to win it, 42-41.
Yes.
And it's actually pretty awesome. So good old Will Grier, 16 seconds left to, of course, Gary Jennings, who's also going to go very high in the draft when that happens. 33-yard touchdown pass, and then a 2-point conversion with 16 seconds left. So awesome end to this game. I was really glad I caught it.
Hey, man, and I've said this for years, even when there was rumors that Jimbo might leave, even back when he got courted by, Auburn and LSU. I love Dana Holgorsen, man. I think, behind Lincoln Riley, and at that time, Lincoln Riley wasn't as known as the offensive mind that he is now, but I think Dana Holgorsen has one of the best offensive minds in college football. Would love for him to be the head coach of any team that I root for. I think he's a fiery coach, and I think he's got a great offensive scheme that he runs. So, yeah, anytime I see them score a lot of points, I just think about old Dana, man, and I love it, man. I just picture him in a little coon hat, it's great. It's great. Couple quick things before we wrap it up, though. Game Day has announced that they're going to Chestnut Hill for the Boston College Clemson game. I just want to get your quick thoughts on that. I know a lot of people nationally kind of thought, oh, what a lame location. But, honestly, I think that, Chestnut Hill is actually a pretty cool place. Of course, it's not the huge stadium that other places have, but I think that actually is going to be a great environment. before we get to our previews and our picks here, what do you think about that game and just that environment, what it's going to be like? Because I know you went there recently, a couple 3 weeks ago, I believe.
Yeah, really glad for Boston College getting this chance to host it and have the 8 p.m. ABC game. Really cool experience. It's a Jesuit school. The architecture reflects that in a way. Pretty cool, man. I think it's a great campus. I mean, it's no Virginia Tech, but it's a pretty nice campus. I really enjoyed it there. Really glad for their fan base because, shout out to Mike, in case he's listening. He was a Boston College fan. He and his wife sat behind us at the game. And they had a couple of Virginia Tech fans they knew. He's from Connecticut, went to BC, now lives in North Carolina. By the way, he said that we were the nicest fans that he'd ever met, and people were buying him drinks, and they're having a good time. But I guess that's what happens when you're losing a team. You're nicer to people. But so great time, and was just telling him I was so glad for the way Boston College is playing this year. I told him I hope that they got game day coming this week, and I was actually honestly shocked when they announced it because you just don't expect them to go to Chestnut Hill. But I'm really glad that they're going to these different locations they haven't been to in a while. I'm sick and tired of seeing them at Michigan Stadium, the Shoe. Like, we've seen those before. We've seen those fan bases. I want to see BC fans packing it out there on Saturday.
I want to see Red Bandana Part 2, honestly. That's what I want to see. But
if they bring those bandanas back, Clemson ain't winning.
Oh, no way, yeah. All right, man. Well, let's go ahead and knock out our picks for this upcoming week. We've got a Thursday and a Friday matchup before the regular weekend Saturday games. So first up, man, Wake Forest at NC State. It's a 7:30 kickoff on ESPN. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, so I actually haven't picked any of these games, so I'm just everything's a gut feeling. Gotta go with NC State, man. I don't trust them at 6-2, but Wake Forest has no defense. One of these days, Wake's gonna figure it out, because we thought they were way better than they've looked this year, so they might randomly figure it out one of these days. And I know it's moving back to in-state rivalries and stuff, but you got to pick NC State here.
Yeah, I agree.
Finley.
Yeah, I'm going with NC State as well. It's a hard place to play, man, especially on a Thursday night, man. The Thursday night gods, they favor the Wolfpack. And I think for Wake Forest, they're going to be a team that we look to next year to have kind of a rebound season, but I'm picking NC State more so because I just think that Wake Forest is just not a good team this year. So we got Louisville at Syracuse going to the Dome on a Friday night, November 9th. That's a 7 p.m. kickoff on ESPN2. I'll pick this one so that it's not like I'm just going off your pick every time. But I'm going. I think this one's an easy one though. Syracuse all the way. I mean Louisville, and we'll talk about this guys eventually. But I think Petrino is probably gone after this season. If not Petrino, at least Van Gorder has to be gone. This might be one of those situations where Petrino has to pull a Brian Kelly and fire in his entire staff to save his job. But I'm going with Syracuse in this one. Eric Dungy's playing well. I will be really upset if Syracuse lays an egg and doesn't win this game at home, but I think they get it done.
Bottom line here, Syracuse does not score more than 70 points in this game. I'm putting out there right now, they do not score more than 70 points. They better win. Watch, 63-24, taking Syracuse. Let's go.
That's absolutely correct. I like that proclamation, man. That's great. Okay, so next we've got North Carolina at Duke. No, it's not the basketball game, but good Lord, if anyone saw Duke play basketball last night against Kentucky, that was an amazing game. Yeah, wow. Yeah, that would... Oh, man, that was a crazy game.
I only saw the score, and I was just like, I was so blown away. This was number 4 playing number 2, and they made number 2 look like they were children.
Oh, it looked like they were playing their exhibition games. It was ridiculous. Those freshmen that they have, that Coach K's got on that team, are ridiculous. But
so if you guys didn't see it, number 4 Duke played number 2 Kentucky. They beat them 118-84. And I think I heard today that 3 freshmen on Duke's team accounted for 84 of those points or 86 of those points or something. Isn't that absolutely nuts?
Yeah, it's crazy. Basically, the 4 freshmen for Duke, if you just took their scoring, outscored the entire Kentucky basketball team. So, yeah, Duke basketball is going to be a problem for people this year. Duke football, on the other hand, they've been a little inconsistent, but who you got in this one, man? North Carolina at Duke, 12:20 Raycom Sports.
I was hoping you'd pick this first because, we saw UNC a couple weeks ago and we're like, man, they barely lost to Virginia Tech. Maybe they can upset Syracuse. They barely lose to Syracuse. And we're thinking 2 3-point losses. Who is this team? You've called all year. They're going to fight for Fedora's job. And then they lose by 10 to UVA. Then they lose by 10 to Georgia Tech. Who is this team? We really don't know. Duke is playing at home. They haven't played particularly well there this year. In fact, the last 2 times they've been home, they've lost. They lost to Virginia Tech 31-14. They lost to UVA 28-14. Duke is the much better football team. I feel like, okay, I'm going to say this now, but I'm not going to pick it. My gut says to pick UNC. I don't know why. It's telling me to pick UNC. But my gut has been right every time this year. But my brain, which is usually wrong, tells me to pick Duke. So I'm going to take Duke.
All right, I'm going to pick UNC. I was literally going to just pick whoever you didn't pick because I think this game's really, really a tough matchup to choose because exactly what you said. North Carolina's been up and down this entire season. They've been losing games but not getting blown out necessarily. They've been playing decently well. And then on the other hand, yes, Duke just came off a road win against Miami, but who is Miami right now? I mean, they're in shambles. So I can't really glean too much from them beating a Miami team that looks like garbage right now. So, I'll go with North Carolina. Maybe Larry Fedora. It's a rivalry game, nice. Man. Anything can happen. So,
True.
Who knows?
True.
All right, man. Next one. Got a big matchup here. You already alluded to it earlier in the podcast. Liberty at UVA, 3 o'clock kickoff on ESPN and Raycom Sports Network. So I'm going to go, shocker, with Virginia. I just think that they get it done against...
What?
I know, man. I know. I'm not into religion, and I think... No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I think that Virginia gets it done. Obviously, this should be an easy game for them.
They're 23.5-point favorites. They better win. Good for Liberty, though. They're only giving up 524 yards on defense this year. So that should help Perkins to have a pretty dang good game this week. But Liberty's offense is nothing to shake, whatever the saying is that I can't think of right now. Their offense is actually pretty dang good at Liberty. They have a great passing attack, and I'm not kidding about that. They pass for 324 yards a game. And if you think, Liberty doesn't play anybody, Liberty actually plays some half-decent teams. I mean, not like great teams, but, Army was getting votes in the poll this week. They played Army. North Texas got votes this year. They played them. They've played decent teams, and they still put up that many yards. Don't look for it to be like a total blowout, but Virginia better get back on track this week. They're going to move to 7-3.
Yeah, I think they get it done, and that's a great point about Liberty, though. And actually, I just remembered, didn't Liberty beat Baylor last year? Albeit a horrible Baylor team, but didn't they beat Baylor last year?
For sure they did.
Yeah, that's right. In like a 44-43 game or something like that. I remember that. But
in good old Liberty, they play at UVA, and then the next week they're at a ranked Auburn team. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare the rest of the season.
Oh, man, I would love for them to beat Auburn and have Gus Malzahn lose his job. I would love that.
That would be amazing. Did you see about, total random tangent, but when Auburn was ranked in the top 10, it came out that one of their players released this thing that said that Coach Malzahn was the stupidest coach ever. He had no idea what he was doing. He's way over his head. Complete idiot. Don't come to the school here because this guy does not know how to actually coach or teach you. And literally after that was released, they started just losing games left and right, and I was just laughing. It was fantastic.
First of all, I don't really believe that necessarily. I don't like Gus Malzahn, but the guy wears glasses and a visor. He's got to be a smart coach. Come on.
But he has a vest, so that's like negative 10 points.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Those sweater vests are brutal, man. But he just, I don't know, man. Gus Malzahn looks like the guy to me that goes to church but then just gets super drunk afterwards. I don't know, that's the kind of vibe I get from him, but I don't know, but okay.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway,
I have never liked Gus. That's all I need to say.
No, I don't either. Yeah. All right, man. So we got your Hokies traveling to Pittsburgh, 3:30 kickoff, ESPNU. I've got to think that Virginia Tech gets a rebound win, but man, this is a hard game because Pitt has been playing really well, especially on the offensive side of the ball recently. Who you got in this one?
I think you should pick this one first.
Okay, I'll do it. And it honestly, I want to pick Virginia Tech because I don't think that they can.
Knew it.
But I'm going to pick Pitt. I'm going to go with Pitt. Because,
I knew it.
Yeah, I want to pick Virginia Tech, and I think that this is one of those things like last week with you where you thought Pitt was going to win, but you picked UVA. I think Virginia Tech's going to win, but I'm going to pick Pitt just because I think it makes more sense. I think trending-wise, Virginia Tech's trending down, Pittsburgh's trending up. But, of course, it's the ACC, so those trends could immediately be reversed. But I'm going to go with Pittsburgh in this one.
Wow. So I've picked Virginia Tech in every single game this season that they've played. And it's funny because I have picked 20 games incorrect this year. So 20% of the games I've guessed wrong have been Virginia Tech games. And I knew I was going to get some of these wrong, like against Notre Dame. But because I'm such a homer, I had to go for it. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
You just have to. I'm struggling here, man. I don't know what to pick. I really don't. I've thought all season Pittsburgh would win this game. But because Virginia Tech has an awful record and they're playing terribly, I have this weird feeling that they might win.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what?
Exactly.
Just because I'm up by 3 games, we have one difference. It'll be fun if you get both these right. My gut says to pick Pittsburgh. This is the second time this week I'm going against my gut. So maybe, 2 wrongs make a right. I don't know. I'm going with the Hokies.
All right, so mark it down, people. I think that Virginia Tech's going to win, but I picked Pitt. And Ian thinks that that Pitt's going to win, but he's going with Virginia Tech.
I told myself all week I was going to pick Pittsburgh. I feel like it's reverse psychology. If I pick Pitt, maybe Virginia Tech will actually win. What do you think I should do? I mean, you've heard my actual opinions, but I feel like if I pick Pitt, maybe Virginia Tech will feel like, I hate them, and then they'll actually try.
Honestly, man, I think that it would be hard for the Virginia Tech to play this badly, this many games in a row, and they're not playing at Lane Stadium, so everything tells me that Virginia Tech's going to win. But I got to go with Pitt, man. I think their offense is playing a lot better, but but then again, Bud Foster I feel like he schemes it up really well against offenses like Pittsburgh, so they're going to have to throw the ball. Pitt's going to have to throw the ball. Cody Pickett's going to have to throw the ball, so that worries me a little bit. But I'm still going with Pitt.
Virginia Tech's going to have to throw it against Pittsburgh's typical press coverage that they always run.
That's true.
Michigan State-style defense. So it'll be interesting to see if Virginia Tech can throw those jump balls with 50-50 balls. It's going to come down to that because Pittsburgh's going to run all over you.
Yeah, Grimsley and Kuma got to have big games for them to win this game, so gonna be interesting. But all right, man, we got 3 more games here. Miami at Georgia Tech. Kind of similar. Miami's really trending down. Georgia Tech really playing well right now. I'm going to go with the Yellow Jackets in this one. I think that, having time to prepare for this Georgia Tech, attack is key. I gave the stat earlier saying that the last 3 road games, Georgia Tech has played so well on offense. The one game that they lost in that little stretch was, I believe, to Duke. And Duke actually beat them because, in my opinion, they had an off week and they had 2 weeks to prepare for that triple option offense. So that's, I think, a huge key in being able to try and be able to stop that Georgia Tech offense. So, that being said, I don't think Miami is going to be ready for this attack. I think that right now, not only their defense is playing okay, but their offense is just in shambles. We already documented the struggles as far as the offensive line goes. They're able to run the ball, but the quarterbacks are not playing well, either one, whether it be because of the play calling or just because of the coaching or whatever the case is. But I'm going with the Yellow Jackets in this one. I just think they're really playing well right now.
I have no idea who to pick in this one either, but I'd pick the Yellow Jackets 2 minutes ago before you started talking. Miami's got to win this game, right? Like, they've got to bounce back. They're supposed to be great this year. They're 5-4. Do we really think Miami's going to go 5-5?
Listen, man.
The truth is, I'd kind of rather Georgia Tech win, go 6-4. I don't know.
Plus, it's at Bobby Dodd Stadium, man. They got that horrible train whistle there, so that's got to account for something, dude.
So bad. So bad.
All right, we got Florida State at Notre Dame, traveling to Indiana. Should be not a great game for the Seminoles. 7:30 on the Notre Dame broadcasting channel. I don't think this is going to be a good game for Florida State. I think that Notre Dame defense is going to be able to get really good penetration against Florida State's porous offensive line. There's unknown as to who's going to start at quarterback, but I honestly don't think it's really going to matter. And then the Florida State defense got exposed last week, so if Notre Dame follows the blueprint that I believe that NC State laid out, I think that they're going to be able to run the ball and then play action over the top against that. Florida State's really struggled in coverage this year, especially getting a lot of pass interference penalties, and so I think that Notre Dame wins this game. My only hope would be that Notre Dame does tend to play down to their competition. They don't always blow teams out that they should. And so that's the little glimmer of hope that I have. But, I mean, I think they opened up as 18-point favorites, so that little glimmer of hope is not enough to overcome 18 points. I'm going with the Irish in this one.
Yeah, I'm just going to go with the Irish. I mean, They do play down to opponents. We saw them almost lose to Pittsburgh. The Irish better get back on track here. But the question is, they're in the national playoff hunt right now. You can totally see Notre Dame slipping up and losing the game. That's a very Notre Dame thing to do. But it's the obvious pick is Notre Dame. Let's just go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, I know the college football playoffs came out, but man, if Notre Dame and Michigan were to play again in a semifinal, boy, you know that game will not go well for Notre Dame. I mean, I'm just calling that right now. If they play in a semifinal, Michigan's going to stomp that, something fierce. So, all right, last game for our conference this weekend. 8 o'clock kickoff on ABC. Clemson at Boston College. Game day crew will be there. Maria Taylor's going to be there. You guys should all watch just for that fact. She's incredible. But I think this is going to be a good game. I don't think that it's going to be a blowout like a lot of national pundits think. I know, listen, Clemson's is the class of the ACC, but I do think, this being the, college game days going to Chestnut Hill, that environment is tough to play at night, especially during these cold weather months. I do think that Boston College keeps it close, but I think in the end, Clemson does pull away. They have too much talent, just too many good players on that defense and on that team. I think that Trevor Lawrence will be needed in this game, unlike the last game. So I'm going, not a big surprise, I'm going with Clemson, but in a closer game than I think a lot of people are anticipating.
I have Clemson as well. I don't think it's going to be as close. At least 2 touchdowns.
If it was red bandana, then yeah, Boston College win this game.
It would be the opposite way.
Oh, yeah.
BC would win by 2 touchdowns.
They wasted it earlier on, man. I mean, I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, whatever. All right, so yeah, that should be an interesting weekend in college football, man. I mean, listen, our conference is so entertaining to watch. All of these games have something about them, maybe except for Liberty, Virginia, but most of these games have something that I do want to kind of look for and see. Luckily, I'll not be traveling this weekend for work, so I'll be able to watch all these games. I'm really excited to actually just be able to hang out with some friends, watch some of these games, eat some good food. You got a good similar weekend lined up, man?
I do. I'm actually going to Pittsburgh this weekend.
Nice.
So I've got a buddy, and his cousin lives out there. And so they're both from California originally, and he hasn't been out there, so I'm going with my buddy and his girlfriend out there on Friday. We're off work on Monday for Veterans Day, so just a shout out to the veterans out there. Thank you for your service, for sure. But we get off Monday, so thank you double for that, not only for our freedom, but a vacation day.
There you go.
And so took off Friday. We're going to drive out there. I haven't really spent much time in Pittsburgh, so we're just going to check out everything. There's so many cool things to do there, apparently. So it should be a good time, even if the Hokies lose. You kind of expect that right now. So if they win, I'm just going to feel ecstatic.
There you go, man. And then you just stay in town for the game on Sunday for the Steelers, right?
No,
okay.
No, but also, really interesting, Virginia Tech does not play well at, as my buddy calls it, the ketchup dump, Heinz Field. Virginia Tech does not play well there at all. In fact, when we beat them there 2 years ago, that was the first time since the 90s we'd beaten them there. And I know that we had a lot of off years there when they were in the Big East and we were in the ACC, but still, man, not a good place for us to play.
Oof. Well, hopefully the result will be a little better. But hey, I did pick Pitt, so I'm hoping that the Panthers pull it out, man.
Wow, thanks.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your love and support. I'll cheer louder this week just because of that. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us on another great episode of ACC Audible. This is Ian here. Hope you guys have a ton of fun this week. ACC football Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But let's go ACC. Let's beat a little Notre Dame. Let's beat a little Liberty. For my buddy Ken, this is Ian. Have a great week.